Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Ambassador Wendy Sherman. She served as U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in the Obama administration. She was also the lead negotiator for the Iran nuclear deal. Back in the Clinton years, she also played a central role in talks with North Korea. Those two issues are obviously on top of the agenda in Washington. This is why we're very pleased to have her today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to add that you're currently a senior counselor at the Albright Stonebridge Group, a senior fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School, and last but not least, you're about to publish a book. It's called Not for the Faint of Heart, Lessons in Courage, Power, and Persistence.
Indeed.
Obviously, you've needed a lot of those during those negotiations. I want to begin with North Korea. We've had the highest level visit by a North Korean official in the U.S. in 18 years. There was a meeting with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. There's a lot of speculation about this June 12th summit between President Donald Trump, Kim Jong-un. It's a risky gambit, it would seem, but do you favor such a meeting, maybe without the necessary preparations beforehand?
I have supported the meeting, in large measure because North Korea believes that only leaders make decisions because Kim Jong-un is the only one who makes decisions. He has some pressure from his military, but he has no real parliament, he has no free press, and he certainly doesn't have a we the people. So he does get to do what he wants to do, and he thinks he is the only decider. In the United States, although we have checks and balances, President Trump believes he's the only decider. And so, yes, I think there need to be preparations. I'm not sure there have been enough.
Is there enough time?
Well, I don't think there's enough time to do it properly. But I think there has been certainly some intensive preparations over the last few days, and having a dialogue is certainly preferable to going to war.
Right. 18 years ago, there was kind of similar high-level visits. You were in those conversations with the very senior North Korean officials who came with a letter inviting President Clinton to come to Pyongyang. There were negotiations, but they were not successful. Are there any lessons to be drawn from this past episode?
Well, what happened at the end of the Clinton administration is Cho Myong-ruk came to the United States. He was the vice chair of the National Defense Commission, which is really the top level of the government in North Korea. And he invited President Clinton to come, and we said that presidents don't come a week after they're announced, but obviously Donald Trump has a different point of view, though it's been a few weeks since he agreed to come. But President Clinton sent Secretary Albright instead. I went with her, along with a small team. We had very serious discussions about stopping any missile testing to ensure that they wouldn't have a delivery system for nuclear weapons if they ever develop them. We thought we'd put a halt on the development of the weapons themselves. And what happened is we ran out of time. That was a very contentious presidential election between Al Gore and George Bush. And when George Bush won, he decided not to pursue the negotiation we had begun, which I think was unfortunate.
A missed opportunity?
A missed opportunity. So I think that you take the opportunities you can. I think you have to be very tough. You have to be very clear about what you want. What the right and left margins of the negotiation will be. And you can't, as my book is titled, be faint of heart. It's tough going.
Right. What do the North Koreans want? Sanctions relief, economic help, a peace treaty with South Korea, all of the above?
I think they want all of the above, but more than anything, they want to make sure that their regime will be secure. We've seen in the press that has just come out today out of the dinner last night that there's still a lot of difference about what we mean by denuclearization. The North really sees that as not only what they do, but that the United States removes its umbrella of security for South Korea and Japan in terms of nuclear doctrine, that we remove our troops from the Korean Peninsula.
Done?
I don't think that should be done very quickly. I think that, if at all, in the near term, I think they're looking for some assurance. President Trump has tried to give them that assurance, but quite frankly, there has to be something concrete for them, not just the president saying he will, because to your later topic that we'll discuss probably, President Trump withdrew from the Iran agreement, which really sent a signal that the U.S., in terms of credibility and reliability between presidents, you can't count on it. So Kim Jong-un will be looking for something concrete.
Right. Are you concerned that if it doesn't go well, we could go back to the very fiery rhetoric we've seen between the U.S. and North Korea and maybe military confrontation? I mean, is this a real prospect?
I think this is a prospect. Again, the words that have come out of the dinner from last night, and there will be further discussions today that may inform the discussion you and I are having right now, that if they can't get to enough agreement, that the president will go back to pressure sanctions. There were additional sanctions that the U.S. was going to put on at the beginning of this week, which they did not, in an effort to say to Kim Jong-un, we're going to hold back on these sanctions to get you to come to the table and do what's right. But they're here, ready to go if you don't, and then we'll just go back to where we were before, until you're ready to have serious talks.
Right. You mentioned yourself Iran. Obviously, those two issues are related. Speaking of sanctions, Secretary of State Marc Pompeo gave a speech in which he threatened the strongest sanctions in history, quote unquote. He says it's about changing the behavior of the regime and not the regime itself. Obviously, this comes after Trump's decision to withdraw from the nuclear deal that you negotiated. Are you concerned that we might be on a path to war between Iran and the U.S. or Iran and Israel?
I certainly think there is a possibility that there will be an Arab-Persian conflict, most of all, that things have really ratcheted up.
I mean Saudi Arabia, Iran, essentially?
Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel. And the United Arab Emirates, all concerned. Look, there is legitimate concern about Iran's malign behavior in the Middle East. We are all concerned about that. But the reason for the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which we negotiated with Europe, with Russia and China, and the permanent members of the Security Council, plus Germany and the European Union, was because if Iran had a nuclear weapon, their ability to project power into the Middle East and to deter our actions would have been profound. So we had to get the nuclear weapons off the table. I think the president has made a big mistake, quite frankly. I don't think he should have withdrawn. I think we should have built on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action to put a strategy together to push back on their malign activities in the region.
Is it dead now? The Europeans, the Iranians are saying we're working to salvage it. I imagine you have some interactions with them. Is there any realistic prospect of keeping it alive without the U.S.?
It's very tough to do so. I think that neither Iran nor Europe want to rush to kill the deal, that they understand how important it is for stability. And quite frankly, if Iran pulls out of the deal, if they send the inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency out of the country, which could happen, then Trump will say he was right all along. So I think Iran understands that they have, oddly, the high ground at the moment, and that they should be very thoughtful about giving it up. But they have internal political pressures that makes it hard for President Rouhani to stay in a deal if they're not getting the economic benefits that they expected to get.
I mean, just going back quickly to those negotiations, they were long, they were very difficult, but you've had a lot of interactions. Were the Iranians saying to you, we don't trust you, you might pull out of that deal, and this is why it's very risky for us, and today they're saying we were right? Is this the sense you had?
Well, indeed, they said many times, how can we be sure that this deal is durable? And I said, well, how can we be sure that it's durable from your point of view? We had some of these negotiations before their last election, and we didn't know how those were going to turn out. So everybody was at risk. So you put together the best deal you can to make it as durable as possible. But these changes can happen in any administration. Unfortunately, President Trump has gone down a road that I think is the wrong one.
But Mike Pompeo says that the administration still wants to negotiate a deal with Iran. And let's just rewind a few weeks ago, North Korea, the insults from Donald Trump, little rocket man, now he wants to meet him. Is there a possibility, or maybe a strategy actually, on behalf of Donald Trump, to try to play hard and eventually go back to the table? Is this on the horizon with Iran, or do you think because of the regional pressure, the pressures in Washington, that's out of the question?
I think that is out of the question for the near term. I don't think Iran, which is a culture of resistance and quite proud, is going to come back to the negotiating table with Donald Trump after pulling out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I think, indeed, what Mr. Bolton is probably encouraging the president is to try to put those sanctions back on, to make them very tough. I think it's going to get hard to get everybody in the international community to cooperate once again. And even though the president only believes in bilateral sanctions, to be effective or multilateral. And so I think what Mr. Bolton hopes, and perhaps the president, is that these sanctions will be so profound that the people of Iran will rise up themselves and overthrow the government.
So regime change is the strategy, right?
I think regime change is Mr. Bolton's strategy at the end of the day, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Just very quickly, why are you concerned about a war? Do you hear stuff from Israel, Saudi Arabia that worries you, maybe more than what's out in the public?
Well, I'm not sure it's any more than what's out in the public, but I think we have seen a great concern, and I care deeply about Israel's security. I think that what we've just seen in the rockets that have come over from Gaza, great concern. That's intensified, of course, by what's happening in Syria and pressure on the Golan Heights. We've seen Israel take military action to defend itself, and Saudi Arabia certainly believes that Iran is in Yemen, Iran is in Syria, Iran is in Lebanon. Iran wants to have control that Saudi Arabia doesn't want them to have. So I think there are elements here that could ultimately lead to war, and I don't think that's a good thing for any of us.
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set, and thank you for watching this interview. Stay tuned for more news.